Hi, my name's Beck Morley and it's my pleasure to present this next session in our Small Business Big Impact program. For our case study today, we are joined by James Bradley of Diffuse Energy, who is going to share his personal experience about being a small business in Port Stephens. This session is proudly sponsored by Spark CoWork. Well, welcome James, thanks for joining us today. It's lovely to have you and we really appreciate the fact that you're sharing your story with us. Now, I'm just wondering, for those of you who don't know you personally, can I ask you to start with you giving us a little bit more information about how you ended up as a small business owner in Port Stephens, please?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I've got a fairly eclectic background. Back in the days when I had a full head of hair, I ran around in big box retail and did that for quite a few years. Got to the age of 30, decided I didn't want to do that anymore and went to university and studied a degree in engineering. And then went out as a consulting engineer in a kind of a small startup-y style business dealing with local and mines and over in WA as well. And then went back to university to go and do a PhD because I at the time thought that was a fantastic idea. Worked out that that didn't feed my family so well. And so I took on a role at the university as a professional engineer in engineering, which is kind of a super interesting role where I helped researchers kind of build the things they wanted to build to do all their fun experiments that they do.
Excellent.
And that's where I got tangled up with one of the co-founders of Diffuse Energy, Joss Kesby. So he was doing his PhD on small wind turbine technology, and I helped him sort of build out all of his original prototypes for testing. And he got to the end of that and kind of worked out that he'd made the world's best small wind turbine by a reasonable step change. And so started to think about, well, what's next for him? And is there some kind of go that we can make of a small wind turbine? And tripped over a program run by the CSIRO to help researchers commercialise research, and went to go and do it, and got told he had to have a team. So he came back to work, went, oh, do you want to be part of the team? And I went, oh yeah, why not? And roped in another guy, Sam Evans, and off we went. And so that kind of started back in the end of 2017. Ran through a few programs with CSIRO, remained working at the university, kind of trying to work out if we wanted to start a business and how that was all
juggling thing.
Yeah, and then towards middle of last year, decided that we'd kind of got to a point where we needed to make a proper go of it. And so all over a stage of a couple of months, all of us left the university. And at that point set up offices at the university's co-working space at Williamtown. So through the I2N hub at the university. So they've been kind enough, we've been here ever since. So that's kind of how we ended up in Port Stephens, just cracked over the border. And as you know, I actually live up at Corlett. And so when it came to building a workshop somewhere as the CTO, that was going to be near my house. And so we've now got a workshop out at Taylor's Beach as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so we've had the workshop since the beginning of this year, and we've been at Williamtown for, well, about 15 months now.
Fantastic.
So that's us in Port Stephens, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I'm presuming your community, I'm off script now, so I'm presuming your community is actually out there, the hub out there would give you a lot of support, a lot of other small businesses and like-minded, research and certainly the defence and aerospace projects that are out there. Does that buoy you along? Does that give you some sort of motivation when you've got like-minded small businesses that you're working with? Does it become competitive? Does it become motivating?
Interestingly, we're actually out here almost by ourselves.
Right. Oh, right. There you go.
However, yep. there are other hubs run by the I2N, and certainly there's some other groups within that ecosystem that, yeah, certainly we stay in touch with.
Yes.
And yes, there's there has to be a bit of competition, right?
Yep.
So yeah,
it's healthy,
so
apparently.
yeah, and so yeah, we do take a lot of confidence watching other people do things, and we learn from each other as well. Try not to make all the same mistakes, although that seems to not happen too often. Managed to jump down the same hole quite frequently.
Yes.
And of course, we did the program we did with CSIRO has given us a fairly good network nationally as well. And so I guess we've been super lucky in that respect, having done that. Right. So yeah, we've kind of got, local networks and broader networks as well. And yeah, they all help. The more help you can find, the better. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So James, you've got a small team. You mentioned 3, I think, in the team. Being a small business, what's the best part about being a small business?
Yeah, so we've actually just grown to 4.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Recently. No, so it was 3 for a very long time. I think the best thing about a small business is your ability to be super agile. And so, I've worked with big companies and for big companies, and, you try and change something and you've got this massive inertia that you've got to try and shift. When you've got a team of 3, you can sit around a table and say, hey, let's have a crack at this idea, and you just by 4 o'clock that afternoon you've already started. So I quite enjoy that ability just to quickly make a decision and get on with it, without having to convince 57 other people that it's a good idea as well.
Yes.
I guess that's a double-edged sword, right? So kind of you're your own boss, but also you're your own boss, so it's on you when it all goes pear-shaped.
Yes. Nice choice of words, pear-shaped.
Yeah. Maybe almost chose some different ones. Yeah, and I think that ability to be super agile and move really quickly, I enjoy. And of course, we've got visions of being a bigger business. So at some point, that's all we'll enjoy it while it lasts. But
yes.
It's a certain advantage of being a small business. You can kind of run your own race.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the journey for you guys. You've started out in that research and development almost side of things, where you're almost like an entrepreneur. You're in that innovative ecosystem, so that's a whole nother level. You've grown the business into a small business scenario now, so that's a new era for you. And then obviously with that the future sites to be a big business down the track. So it's really unique. Not a lot of people, or not a lot of businesses and products and services go along that track. So I think that's certainly a credit to you guys. I suppose with that though, you'd have to certainly keep your eyes on the prize as to where you're going, but you would have to manage your growth and the stages of that growth. Can you talk to us about that, please?
Yeah, so we certainly have a plan. And that plan is, although it's, I guess, exciting if you look 4 years down the track, it's huge, but it is fairly controlled. So, it's all well and good to say, oh, we'll sell millions, but obviously we can't do that next week. So there is a fairly staged plan for us to grow at a rate that's manageable and I guess partially safe. Because you can dive through your own success pretty easily. So we do have quite a distinct planned attack. Yeah, very good. I'm just talking about maybe not dying of success, but just within small business in the context of that, some of the successes that you're most proud of. What are the things that you really do hang your hat on? Is it about you? Is it about that growth? How you've been able to sort of move along the pipeline? Is it because you guys are fairly unique? I don't profess to know anything about wind energy whatsoever, but I do recognise that, certainly as we're talking about environmental sustainability and all of that kind of thing, that this is and forgive me if I'm wrong, but a new technology. So is that the exciting success for you, that you're part of something that's really quite relevant and current? Yeah, I think probably Australia as a general rule over history has been pretty poor at getting research out the door and doing something good with it.
Yes.
We've got some of the world's best researchers and have for a very long time. And if you can often draw a comparison between us and the research that the US does, and all of a sudden there's a product and someone builds a big business. We've never actually been very good at doing that. And that's where the program that we did through the CSIRO came from. It was the recognition that we kind of not done a great job at that. So I guess that's the exciting thing, is we've taken something that is, a leading edge technology out of the laboratory and we now have a product that I can go and pick up and sell to someone.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an exciting thing to do.
Yeah.
And I still feel ridiculous saying that we've built the world's best something, you know, like
yes.
it's, you feel like a bit of a knob, to be honest, but
but you've kind of got to embrace that, right? You've got to.
But we have, and that's kind of cool.
I think they call that. Is that not called a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, and you just go for it. Yeah.
So that's probably the exciting part for me, is being part of something that's like new and exciting.
Yeah.
And hopefully, and has the ability to make a pretty big impact.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I suppose the other side of that, not that we want to dwell on it too much, but the whole reason for the expo today is to be able to provide support back to small businesses in Port Stephens off the back of a particularly challenging time. And we do recognise that some small businesses have actually thrived out of the beginning of 2020. How have you found, the beginning of 2020 for you guys with COVID and everything that's come with that? Have you found that particularly challenging? Yeah,
so for us, you look back at sort of February, March, it was like running at a full sprint into a brick wall. Everything just stopped. So we're dealing largely with telecommunications. And so the telecommunications industry had kind of come off the bushfire season where everything burnt down and was horrible. And then all of a sudden, everyone had to stay home. And so talking to us about doing something new and cool was like so far down the list of priorities. And so everything really came to a grinding halt. The good news is it's taken a good 6 months, but it's starting now to get back to some kind of normality. We're not all the way there, but it's certainly starting to get back there. A fair amount of, I guess, resilience and, because you struggle because we're new, and it's like for any business that's just starting out, is it us? Is it COVID? Is it, who do you blame?
Yes.
And it's that uncertainty. It's not so much the fact that things aren't going well. It's the uncertainty as to whether, is this our fault or is this something else's fault?
Yes.
You've got nothing to measure against, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
That uncertainty
it is interesting when you look at your SWOT analysis and you look at situation analysis and you think, okay, I'm going to prepare for everything and I've covered this off and I'm educated, or, I've spoken to my mentors or my accountants or whatever, and then along comes something like COVID, which you couldn't actually, other than writing a Hollywood movie about it, you actually couldn't really, something like that doesn't necessarily hit a SWOT analysis. So it is on a whole nother level. I do think broader than that, maybe, though, that certainly is a massive, big challenge. How do you deal with, both professionally and personally, how do you deal with challenges normally? Any words of advice for some of our small business owners out there?
I'm typically fairly upbeat about everything, sometimes to a fault.
Yes.
So I know, as a group, we all kind of came at different times. There's some times when we're like, oh, this is the shot duck. Nobody wants our product. It's not going to work. And it's very easy to get pretty downbeat about it all.
Yes.
I was always like, no, this is just damn COVID. And once this passes, we'll all be good. But when's it going to pass? I don't know. There was I guess, a bit of an internal tension there about our feelings towards it all. But also you just got to keep looking for new ideas and new ways. And so, beginning of the year, we were talking to 4 or 5 customers and thought we were rock stars, and everything was good. Then they kind of, went to sleep for a good reason. And so then we said, well, what are we going to do? And we ended up, we built out a ecosystem map of the entire Australian telecommunication industry with some 180 odd players. And built a full map, and then went, right, now we'll just talk to everybody, right? And so if COVID hadn't have happened, there's no way we would have done that. We probably would have been quite happy just talking to the handful of people that we're talking to. And so, I guess there's a silver lining in everything. It's kind of forced us to go and educate ourselves far more deeply about the space that we're playing in.
Yeah, that's a great insight, actually.
Yeah, so, at the time we just did it because what else were we going to do?
Yes. Although in saying that, there's some people that went to ground and stayed to ground, they couldn't I don't like the word pivot because I think it's been used to death, but there is certainly some small businesses around there who have looked, if I'm not doing my normal trading or my normal way of the way I run my business, then what actually other things can we take a step back that we can't usually, you know, the pace is too frantic normally. Can we just take a step back and actually have a look at what might also be on the horizon? So credit where credit's due, you've been able to do that. And not sort of put up the closed sale sign, you know, closed sign on the front door and say, yeah, great, we'll catch you when this is all over. So well done on that front. Just on your, like professionally, obviously personally, do you get down to the beach? We're pretty blessed to live in an area like Port Stephens. Does that help, you know, manage those stresses and things like that? Spend time with your gorgeous kids?
I've not spent anywhere near the amount of time fishing and doing all those things that I would normally would, which is something that probably needs to change, to be fair. So I've been pretty busy for the last little while.
Yes.
But yeah, certainly, you know, driving, I have to drive past the water every day on the way to work, and that kind of morning, on a nice morning, it is kind of fairly serene and it kind of levels you out a little bit. It is good.
Yes, yeah. Yep. Playing with the kids tends to do that for me too. I'm sure you find the same.
Yeah,
you know, they keep it real, don't they?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. James, as we're currently sitting in the Digitech space in the topics stream for today, is there any, do you have any advice for small business owners in Port Stephens, how they might be able to embrace digital technology to move their small business forward?
Yeah, I think that there's so many options now for sort of streamlining parts of your business using digital technologies. And almost to the point now where there's so much stuff out there, it's hard to kind of navigate what to use, how and when and where, and if it's going to work for you. But I think you just got to try some of these things. Like we've tried lots of things and they haven't worked. And then finally you land on something that, you know, it might only save half an hour a day for you. That's half an hour a day that you can be productive. Yeah. And typically you're trying to streamline stuff that you really don't want to be. Like I'm an engineer, I don't want to be in accounts all day. Right?
Yeah,
so,
I was going to say, can you give us an example? Is that something like your Zero program or something like that?
Yeah, like who wants to be buried in doing, I'm sure there's lots of people out there that love their accounts, but I ain't one of them. And so, you know, and there's ways of streamlining all of that. And so I think you just need to be aware that most problems have been solved. Like someone sometime has been annoyed by something and come up with a solution so far. Yeah. And you know, lots of businesses have been built by fixing these little niggling problems between two different programs. Yeah. And so there's heaps of opportunity to kind of unload yourself of some of that burden, and you've just got to be open to it and go looking. And I think, you know, things like this, where you can talk to other business owners and just see what they're doing. Yes. There's lots of stuff out there to kind of just streamline. And a lot of them only streamlining a small bit, but you know, you do 10 of those and it adds up pretty quickly. Absolutely, absolutely. And they all, most of them cost some money, but you know, oftentimes you can, that half hour, if you're being productive, you'd make more money than you would by the, you know, $5 or $10 a month that it costs you to save that time. Yeah, no, that's good advice actually. Yeah, and you mentioned before, so you sound like a guy who's fairly proactive in finding solutions amongst your team, and obviously with your dealings with the CSIRO, I'm sure there's a level of almost like a mentorship there. Would you encourage small business owners? Sometimes I think it's a little isolating as a small business owner. You go to work, your head down, you're all encompassed by it, and you forget that there are resources and support and things out there. Can you talk a little bit to that? You know, do you get out and do the networking? Do you have a mentor? Do you know, engage with other small businesses around Port Stephens just to kind of have a bit of a chat? It's interesting. If you had have asked me 3 years ago, hey, James, do you need a mentor? I would go, what am I a mentor for? Like, old crusty bloke. And it's interesting because I always thought, you know, if I had younger people working for me, I always thought it was important to mentor, you know, junior people, but I never really thought about the fact that maybe I should have one. But anyway, yes. You know, I've built a pretty sizable network for myself. Yeah, just networking and getting around the place, both locally and more broadly over the last sort of 2 years. Yeah. And I'm now at a point where most problems I can jump on the phone and talk through it with someone. Yeah, great. And there's massive value in that, right? So, absolutely. And you're right. It is really easy just to kind of get in your little groove and think that all your problems are unique to you. Turns out they're not. people have had the same problems at some point.
Yes.
And, you know, mentoring is mutually beneficial. So, you know, I've mentored people in recent times, and I've more often than not got just as much as they have out of that relationship. It's the best way of holding a mirror up to your own.
Oh, isn't it just?
Self.
I
like,
couldn't agree with you more.
You sit there telling someone, oh, you should do this, and in the back of your mind, you're like, you muppet, you should do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so, people should be pretty open to going and finding someone to help them out in that way, because you're not actually asking for that much of a favour. It's typically mutually beneficial. So, strongly encourage people. And you don't have to call it a mentor. It can be just someone that you're just going to have a coffee with and chat through what's going on.
Absolutely.
But massive value in that kind of relationship.
Just, keeping connected. I think that's half the thing as well, is just making sure that, you know, like you say, there's problems that we're all experiencing, or challenges that we're all experiencing. And, you know, if you've got somebody that's in your corner and they want the best for your business, they want the best for, you know, the beautiful place we live in. So, yeah, I think that 9 times out of 10, most small business owners in Port Stephens will be happy to share their experiences and their stories. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, most people are generally pretty generous with helping out.
Yes.
Unless you're trying to sell exactly the same product as them, then maybe not. But
yes.
You know, we're all
you guys are fairly
together.
unique in that space.
We struggle to find someone else doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think, and oftentimes, you know, when you are in your own little groove, your problems seem often much bigger than what they actually are. And having someone else just go, that's pretty simple, just do this, kind of just brings you back down. You can get pretty stressed out about actually quite a small issue.
Yes, keeps it real, as they say in the classics. So just 2 other questions before we finish up. What does success look like for you guys in, say, 5 years' time? When we review you in 5 years' time, James, where you're so incredibly famous that we can't even get a speaking spot from you, what does that look like for you guys?
I don't know if it's about fame. So I think for us in 5 years, but to give some background, we're selling wind turbines into remote telecommunications. And so most remote telecommunications run off some solar and a diesel generator. And so our plan is to remove all diesel generators from that space by 2025.
From the world?
From Australia.
Right.
And then, you know, it is, and that in itself is a pretty reasonable call. There's about 33,000 appropriate towers in Australia.
Wow.
And what's interesting is globally, Australia in the telecommunications space is actually seen as a really good test bed. So just by pure luck, we're here in Australia. And so if you kind of get something through the big players in Australia, then internationally people go, well, if it's good enough for them, it's probably good enough for us. And there are companies in Southeast Asia with more telecommunication towers as a company than the entire Australian market. So globally, there's a massive opportunity. And so in 5 years, we should be well into some of that. So, yeah, we should be a business operating internationally.
Fantastic.
And potentially still based here in sunny Port Stephens.
Fantastic. That's what we love to hear.
Yep.
A breeding ground for very wonderful success stories, I have to say.
Yep.
So just as we conclude, James, is there any further advice or anything you'd like to share with our small business community in Port Stephens? Any famous last words?
I think something that I struggle with, and I think I've learned, is that you need to be really good at the thing that you're good at doing. And that it's around staying focused on the thing that you're good at. It's really easy to see this land of opportunity out in front of you and just go and try and run after all of it. And you end up doing all of it pretty badly. And then you end up probably not being particularly successful at any of it. I think, most people have started a business for a really good reason. They've seen an opportunity in a particular space and they have some kind of skill set to go and chase that. You need to, almost to a fault, stay super focused on that mission and then be super, super good at what you do, and then success will come, right? And then once you're good at that, by all means, knock yourself out and go and branch out into other things.
Yeah.
But I think the focus as a small business is just super critical. Yeah.
Excellent. That's excellent advice. And what a lovely way to end our session this morning. I just wanted to thank you very much for your time. We do appreciate your time and your expertise in contributing back to the community. James, I'm assuming you're going to be hanging around and will be available in the meeting hub. So I'm saying this on your behalf, but I'm sure if anyone has any questions or comments or they'd like to talk to you confidentially and personally, that you can just jump on over to the meeting hub and certainly catch up with James. But we do really appreciate your time. All the best with those amazing plans. I'm looking forward to saying one day that, you know, I knew that guy once. But we're looking forward to, like you say, watching your small business grow into a bigger business and still be based here in Port Stephens. So we really do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Cheers. All right. Bye.
Bye.